Hello and welcome to hobby vlog number 34. If you're not yet a subscriber and you enjoy my videos, please don't forget to subscribe. And also don't forget to ding that bell and click all so that whenever one of my videos goes live, YouTube does tell you. This week has been a pretty intense week. I've been working very hard to get ready for another game with Tim today, where we're playing Battle Companies remotely, which was a lot of fun, and there is a clip towards the end of this video which will show you that. And additionally, I've been working towards Battle Games in Middle Earth, which won't show up in this video as it happens, but has taken some of my time this week. I again stretched myself, did too much, made way too many river sections, but I'm looking forward to you seeing those videos in the video, on Tuesday. Other than that, the Sarissa kit that keeps fighting back has kept fighting back, and what I'd like to say is that where you see it at the end of this video is certainly not good. That filler that I've used didn't work, so it's going to be coming off, I think. So yeah, if you're building along or thinking that's a good technique, take it from me, it's not. But we live and learn, and that's generally what I'm doing here. I'm making a lot of mistakes and then fixing them and moving on. I'm looking forward to seeing how it will work. The idea was there, just the execution failed. So I'll stop rambling now. I'll get on to the clips from through the week. Hope you enjoy them. Grab a cup of tea, settle yourself down, maybe do some hobbying, and I'll see you again to wrap up at the end. Our game was a great success. It was a lot of fun, and while we didn't get very far in it, it did prove that there is an idea here which is going to work. However, a couple of things came out of it. One of which was that using the bottle tops didn't work because they were too big, and trying to use bottle tops or any other counter next to a miniature also didn't work, mainly because when you had like quite a scrum developed, so you had multiple miniatures all close together, well, you couldn't get your counters. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw away those wonderful wonderful bottle tops that I did. They can go back into rotation for being used for painting handles. And I've got the 28mm, the actual official bases for strategy battle game, and I am going to attempt to draw on with glue, and I have the fast drying basing glue here from Luke's APS, the numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in, and then I have yellow flock here, which is homemade as it happens, and I'm going to sprinkle the yellow flock over the top, let it completely dry, and then I'll sprinkle a different coloured flock over the rest of the base so that you'll be able to read the numbers very easily. Hopefully that's the plan anyway, and I can then move these figures around. Instead of trying to have the actual miniatures for my opponent, I will just have the bases. So let's see how well this goes. I'm going to get the basing glue. The reason why I've chosen to use this is because it dries very, very solidly and is very easy to apply, as you can see. So there's a 1, and what we'll do is we'll drop our flock on. Perfect. Put that there to dry. And now let's do number 2. Like a bit drunken, but it'll be recognisable, I think. Now number 3. I'll stop filming in a minute because this will be very repetitive, and I'll be back later. So that didn't go very well, so I will wipe that off with some kitchen towel and try it again. Let's get my towel closer to hand. Quite near me then. So I need to clean it completely, because it needs to be accurate. Okay, so I'm going to carry on with that now, get the rest of them done, and I will be back to show you what it looks like when they're finished. As I turned off the camera, I had a bright idea, so I thought I'd quickly turn it back on again and show you, because it's worked quite well. So I've done them before. What I've done is I've put a little bit of glue out onto my palette there, and I've got a toothpick. And with that toothpick, I am able to be much more accurate with where I am placing my glue. And doing a complicated shape like a 5 would be very, very difficult with the nib of the nozzle even of the glue bottle. But as you can see, it's actually relatively easy to draw with a toothpick. So that's probably what I'm going to do for all of the rest of them, is draw the shape on with the toothpick. So there'll always be a couple of drunken ones to remind me of when I didn't have that idea. But at least I've thought of it now, and there you are. So that's what I'd probably recommend that you do if you're going to try and follow along. The other thing that I'm going to redo, though I'm relatively happy with the tiles I did, and I might actually do a little bit of work on them, is when I was out today looking for some other things, I came across these. Now these are actually plasterboard backed, so they've got like a foil on the back, and they've got like a textured, you can see a textured cover on the front, and they've got a bit of tape going around the edge, which I don't want to remove, because then it's going to crumble, and they're actually not as rigid as I first thought they were, but they're only a quid in the UK, per quid 50. They're also not quite, as you can see, they're not quite 2 foot. They are just short of it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these into a 2 foot-ish board using string instead of coffee stirrers, because I will be able to stretch it very accurately across each 3 inches, and that will actually be straight. Glue that down with PVA, put my flock on, and it should be a relatively easy thing to do. Hopefully, I said that now, haven't I? Relatively easy. So the way I'm going to go about doing this is I'm going to mark out the exact centre, and then I'm going to mark 3 inches away from the exact centre, and that means that each edge will have a slightly smaller square than 3 inches, but that's fine, because as long as you know that, it's generally okay. So we've got a quarter over that edge and a quarter over that edge. Let's just do that again. There we are. So that's exactly in the centre of this half. So then we'll go 9, and we'll go 6, and we'll go 3, and that's our squares there. And then we'll go 15, 18, 21, and that's our squares there. So what I'm now going to do is go around, mark each of these on all the other edges, and then draw the lines. So it'll be done in pencil first, and then I'll bring you back when I'm about to start gluing down the string. Right, so what I've got is I've got my twine there, and I've clamped it in place. This is my first idea, my first attempt. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint PVA carefully over the twine and onto the board underneath. And I'm not going to do any more now, because if this works, then I'll quickly do the rest of it tomorrow. But if it doesn't work, then I'll need to think of a different idea. But I think it should work, and the reason I think it should work is I'm pretty sure that this is a paper top, and so PVA should stick nicely to the paper. Let me see if it's actually easier, rather than that, to just go a bead of PVA and then come along. Yeah, that's going to be easier. Come along afterwards and spread it out correctly. There we are, so there's that in there, and let's just spread that in. And this is going to be much more accurate, as you can see, than my idea with the coffee stirrers. Nice as they looked, they weren't straight. And when you're dealing with accuracy like we are, it needs to be straight. Even this is wibbling a bit, but not half as much as the coffee stirrers did, and it's springing back, which is important. So I'm going to, there we are, that's that. So I'm going to let that to dry overnight. It's late now, I'm talking quietly because we have a very disturbed Rosie this evening. Difficult. It's amazing I've managed to get any time to do this. Well, just decided to do this instead of sleeping. So there we are. I'll let that to dry, see whether that has sealed in correctly or not by tomorrow morning. And if it has, I will just do the rest of it and show you it done. And if it doesn't work, then I'll come back with another attempt to show you that. So let's see if that works. These work quite well, actually, as you can see. The 2 and the 3 are a bit rubbish, so I've cleaned the 3 off already, and I'm going to scrape the 2 off also. But they were ones that I did before I came up with the toothpick idea, so I'm not surprised that they're not so good. And I thought I'd just quickly show how easy it is to scrape off before you're sealing it, but also how difficult it is as well. This is with Luke's APS's basing glue, and it really is very, very good. It's very sticky and very secure, so that gives you an idea of how good that is. So what I'm going to do is get my toothpick again and get some more of that basing glue, apply the glue to both of these, to the 2 and the 3, and then let that to dry, and then I'll be back later to finish off the process with some different colours around the outside. But for now, they're definitely going to be visible on the camera, which is really, really cool. I had a horrendous migraine in the night. It was horrible, woke me up. Took some pills, wouldn't go away, so I got up to make a cup of tea. And while I was up, I did the rest of this because it has worked pretty well. Now, I do have an issue, which you can see here, with the cross pieces, which is laying across the first. So these ones are on the bottom and these ones go over the top. Could be that I could do something a little bit smarter with that, and if I never did this again, with regard to twisting it around, maybe, so that there's not that raised area. However, didn't do that. So that will be okay, because what I'll be doing is I'll be putting some more terrain material down in the squares, and I'll push it underneath, and then that will secure there. So that's looking a lot better. It's a lot straighter and a lot clearer and a lot more accurate. The other day I airbrushed these with a green base, and to see that you'll have to watch my episode number 3 of my airbrushing 101 for absolute noobs, because that's where you'll see it. I've got that just down as a base colour, and I think that's going to be sufficient because I'm going to be trashing this quite badly. I'm not trying to do what I've done here. So if I just rotate the camera slightly and zoom in, what you'll see here is something I'm quite proud of. I did this for D-Day, 75th anniversary of D-Day, and this is a Horsa glider. I identified the pilot and the co-pilot, and I also managed to find out the names of all the people that were in this particular glider, this number LW943, and painted it up and got it done in time for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. However, like I say, I'm not worrying about doing it with the camouflage and what have you. This is a scatter terrain, and it will be covered in flock and other stuff because it's going to have crashed into a load of bushes. However, what I do need to do is paint in the stripes, the invasion stripes, as you can see. So what I'm going to do, I managed to break my plate. I'm going to have to get a new one, but for now that'll do. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to get some white paint and some black paint, and I'm going to very, very roughly paint these in. Now, the thing to remember is that the invasion stripes were painted on in a hurry and without people really paying lots and lots of attention, so you don't have to do them too neatly. Indeed, transfers like is on this is probably a little bit too neat. However, we're going to have some on the tail here, and we're going to have some on the wings. So I'm going to get started. I will be back when I've finished. I might show you I might keep shooting just for one. So I'll get myself a brush. Get myself a brush, it's about that wide. A little bit of water on it, a little bit of white on it, and we will just draw a white line. And then we'll do another one here, and I'll fill in the blanks with the black afterwards. So I'm going to do that on here and on the tail plane, and I'll be back to show you what it looks like when it's done. It won't take me very long, but there's no point in you seeing me painting how many stripes? 1, 2, 3, lots, 14, lots of stripes, all the same. And like I say, I'm doing it like quite roughly, because in real life, if you look at the pictures, they actually were put on quite rough and not very accurately. So there we are, invasion stripes. There we are. So I've painted on the well, I've done the first coat at least, I might do another one, but I painted on the black and white stripes, and I've also painted on the underneath as black because that's what it was. It was a night plane, so they painted underneath black so it was hard to see, an early version of stealth. So I'll let that dry now, and then when that's done I'll be ready to start arranging the diorama. I'm nearly completed on this. This is really cool. I'm very excited about this one. It's going to look great. I've got some ideas about how I'm going to arrange it, but it's going to be pretty mangled, and it's going to be a lot of fun in terms of terrain and scenicking. Ready for the next stage on the DSF230 now, which is step 5. So glue the nose top panel, which is this shape here, into position, and it goes in there. So I'm going to cut that out and glue that in. Just cardboard, so very easy to do. And then you want to form the fuselage bottom panel L, which is this, and glue that to the assembly. So I might cut that out as well while I'm doing it, because I think these two can go together. There we are, just a couple of tabs to snip. And finally, fold the cab window, which is this one here, and glue in place. Note this is a small panel and is only etched for detail for painting the window frame and glazing. That's given me a hint that I need to paint this quite accurately, which I probably will do because I'm enjoying this build, and it so far is going together quite well. So that's the next set of drawings that I've got on the instructions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my PVA, which is not to hand right now, it's over there. I'll get my PVA and, won't be a second. Okay, I have my tools. A little bit of PVA on my half plate because I broke my plate. Let's move that out the way. We can take these clamps off now, because that's all nice and dry. And what it's saying is that you put this in there. So if you couldn't see that, apologies, you put that in there. Okay, so I'll take that out again if I can. Just pop a little bit of glue in that little area there. So I'll try and keep this in shot this time. So this is where that first panel goes. And if you were advanced, you could probably cut the panes of glass out of the panel, the cab window panel, and then paint this up a bit and make it look nice. But I'm not gonna bother with that. So that's in place. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at this. So we have some striations here, some lines, which we're going to need to score, I think, so that we can bend it more easily. So we'll quickly draw our knife lightly down each of these. And I think once this is done, we'll need to put our clamps on again, so that's good. So that will now bend nicely, as you can see. That's the idea of those striations. And what that does is it goes on and it clips on through these little tabs and then glues on the bottom. So rather than fit it and then try and pull it out and then break it, I'm going to put some glue on straight away, because that does look like it fits quite nicely. So we'll just apply glue all the way to all of these struts, like so. And we will also apply glue to the edge of the cardboard, because then it's got more of a chance of actually securing around the edges. So I'll just run a light bead of PVA all the way around there as well. Okay, and with that PVA in place, we can now drop the cardboard into place. So I think actually I'm going to go from the front. Yes, that's the best way to do it. If you go from the front, then you can get that over the trailing tail thing more easily than if you go from the back and then try to get it over the front. So we'll do that. That slots in very, very nicely. And yes, as I thought, what you're going to want is just to pop some clips, some clamps on again, just to hold that in place while that dries. So there, and there. And actually, I am actually going to leave that there, and I'll do the the cab window panel when that's dried, because you can see I've wanted to put the clamp right there, and that's going to be going to get in the way of where the glazing goes. So there we are, we've got to a good place there. I will be back on that when that's dried and I can put in the cab window panel. This is now dried, so we're ready to do the next step, which is the cab window panel. If you remember, well, of course you remember, because it was only a second ago. So you need to fold this. So I've got my knife, so I'm going to score down that line there and that line there to make it so that it will bend nicely. And then we will bend it nicely, like so. And then, oh, that's actually not bent nicely. There we are. And then we will put that in place, and I will glue that in with my PVA and get a little clamp and hold it in place. So first of all, let's pop some PVA on my plate, and then run some PVA around the edge of this and onto the edge of the rest of the cardboard that's all around where it's going to stick. Doesn't have to go that far forwards because it's actually not going to go right the way to the nose, I realise. So there we are, a bit of PVA, maybe a little bit too much, take some of it off. And then what we'll do is we will put that in place like so. Done. There we are. And that actually holds itself in place quite nicely. Okay, so we've done the that page, so we can get rid of that instructions. So let's move on to the next one. The next one involves the wings. I'm going to pop that to the back of the bench out of sight. Zoom out a little bit because it's actually a little bit too constrained for me. Glue the wings N and O into the fuselage. Right, okay, so these are the wooden wings. So we're actually going to need that fuselage again sooner than I realised. But that's cool. Well, that was easy. That one just fell out. It was already popped. This one we'll just take the little catches off. And we'll have a look at how this goes. So these go in in there, or is it the front or the back? I see. Right, okay, so what you can see is they're actually going to go all the way through. Okay, you can see there. So this side, the right hand side as I'm looking at it, wants to go in the back one, because that's going to push right the way through, hopefully, if you've not screwed up. This would be a terrible time to find that you've made a mistake and find that it doesn't fit. I am going to take a lesson from my previous builds, and I'm going to pause the camera briefly, have a look at this, not force it, and I'll come back when I've worked out what I've done wrong. So that one went in while I was wiggling it, as she said. That's what she said. So let's see if I can do that again on this side, but in camera. I think that it's just the case. I mean, this, you can see the back one's going in. It looks like the front one is just not quite lined up right. But if we wiggle, there we are. It's a little gentle wiggling motion. And there it is, it's going in the slot. So we'll put some glue in now that it's started to go in. It's just quite tight. What I probably should have done is sanded down the, but I don't have my mask to hand, and that was going to be my next thing to do, was to go and find the mask, but I've managed to do that. So that just required a little bit of encouragement, gentle encouragement, as in some kind of rocking motion backwards and forwards, and you can see we've got some wings. Excellent. Glue the rear wings, P, onto the tail. So let's have a look. That's going to be P, so let's cut that out. And let's remember what happened last time, where I managed to rip the entire tail section off of the other plane when I was just slotting it in place and didn't use any force at all. That was crazy. So we'll be very careful of that not occurring again. So let's have a look. P goes in like that. There we are. So we're going to get a little bit more glue. That fit, or appeared to fit okay. So we'll put some glue in the notch and there. And again, just gently wiggle it in. Let's not push it in too hard. There we are, that went straight in. And actually, what I'm noticing is if I put some glue in underneath, that actually sits on the fuselage. So there we are. And that could be quite ripe for a clamp. Is it supposed to sit on the fuselage? Let's have a look at the picture. Yes, I think it is. Yeah. So there we are. That's in place. That's in place now. So use a 90-degree piece of scrap to ensure best fitting. Right, so 90-degree piece of scrap. What does it mean by that? To ensure best fitting. Does it mean that it wants to be 90 degrees there? I think that's what it means. So it doesn't want to press down onto the fuselage. So I made a mistake there, which is fine. I've corrected it, so that's what that means. And then the next thing it's telling me to do is to glue the cardboard onto the wings. So we have a card here going over the top, and we have another card here. I'm going to cut that. So we're gluing these on here, and then we're going to take the tail plane, which is here, and we're going to glue that on as well. So let me get these done first, and this is another place where there might be call for clamps just to hold it in place. So we'll put a thin smear of glue, PVA, over the top, not too much. I'm not going to worry myself with the flaps and moving them to a different angle in these builds, certainly. That might be something, if I come back and buy these again, I might look at doing these a little bit more with some of these more advanced options. As you can see, the flaps actually do move. They're pretty cool, actually. So we'll put that in, and I'll grab a clamp, and we'll do one clamp at one end and one at the other, just to hold it in place, just so that it doesn't move, because it could quite easily move, and then you'd be annoyed at yourself. So there we are. And then we'll do this one. Need a little bit more glue. And last but not least, for this process, we're going to grab the knife again. Excuse the arms. Yeah, they're big old wings, aren't they? I suppose that's what gliders have, big old wings. I'm going to cut this out, which is for the tailplane card. And we're going to glue that on over the top as well. So, we're nearly done. Might need a few more clamps on that, actually. Might need some in the middle. You know, let's over clamp rather than under clamp, because then you're definitely going to get good glue, good adhesion across the entire length, and you're not going to come across to it later and find that something's fallen off or it's just not right. So that then glues over the top, and again I'm going to need to make sure that I get that at 90 degrees. There we are. Come back in with a bit more with the 90 degrees scrap, and make sure that I've got that right. I really need to clean this paint plate. It's got green paint all over it. Right, so that's that. I'll just make sure that that's at 90 degrees, which it is now. Good, okay. So the next thing it's saying is about gluing the wing support struts to the wings. Glue the wheel panels to the undercarriage frame. So let's pop our little plane to one side. It's quite awesome, that. I'm really pleased with this so far. And what we're doing is we're working on the undercarriage, which is this bit here, which is the undercarriage frame. There we are. And we're looking at the wheel panels, which is U, and that's these. It's nicely organised, these sprues. They're not hard to find the parts normally. Can be, but not normally. There we are. So we've got those. We will knock out the spare bits there, and then these glue on. They're square and they push through and they glue in quite nicely. So a little bit of glue on each end, and we will fit those in. I've put a bit too much glue on that, but it'll wipe off. There we are. So that's quite an interesting thing. If you find that you've done a little too much glue, then you can come along with a brush. Let me show you this. Way too much glue on that. Way too much glue in there. All that white glue. So we can just come in here with a brush and just clean it up. And that's it done. Dealt with. It won't be an unsightly blob then. Okay, so we'll stick the Diorama. Done. So there we are, those are our wheels. And then it says glue the card tyre rim W to the wheel. So we'll get that done. And I think probably what I'm going to do then is let that dry and let them dry, and then we'll come back later on to glue the supports to these wheels, actually to the fuselage, and glue the skid on. And then I think it's done bar painting. So yeah, I'm just going to finish this up. So we're going to put these two cardboard tyres on, which again is just going to need a very small amount of glue around the outside of each for these wheels, like so. And then they will just, I hate the word just, they will not just, you see, that's why I hate the word just. You say they will just, and then it turns out that you drop it and it looks like you're an idiot. They will clearly stick there. Well, I'm going to let all of those sub-assemblies dry now, and I'll be back later when they're dry to do the final few steps. Very cool indeed. Now the bit that I've been looking forward to. Let's make this into some scatter terrain. So what you can see is I've put the wings on backwards, but that's fine, I've not glued it. What you can it's a good thing I hadn't glued it, what an idiot. Wings on back to front. Anyway, right. That's tickled me. Alright, so what I'm going to be having is, like I say, crash glider. I said it 100 times, but it is going to be a crash glider. And the way it's going to be arranged is something like that. So I will be gluing these together, because you've got to have 3 points of contact for things to be secure. There will be the rock will be here for another point of contact. And then it will also be attached to the base, and this will be glued here and all the way along, and with the, you can't see it because of where the wing is, but with the slide out as well. So that will clearly have come in and crashed, and the cockpit isn't on the build because that's the bit that was missing from this kit, and I've managed to, I can get away without that. It's basically been destroyed, but that is going to look absolutely brilliant, and I'm going to be very, very pleased with that on the tabletop when I finally get to play in Chain of Command, which is what this is going to be for. So I'm going to start to glue that together shortly. I'm not going to glue it straight away because I'm wondering whether I'm going to use Luke's modelling compound on this, but I'm a bit nervous because that previous batch, the one that I'm working with at the moment, doesn't seem to be very good, and so I don't really want it to peel off, which sometimes does happen off of the MDF bases here. So I might go for merely gluing this in and then go straight in with the paint mix for the ground cover. And yeah, so I'm going to have a bit of a think, work out how I'm going to actually secure this straight away, and when I've done that, then I will be back to show you what I do. So I'm just thought I'd quickly show the rough layout. I'll be back very shortly. Thinking has happened. Knives have come out and have cut up old bits of twig. And now we're going to start to actually do something. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to glue the wings on in the right place, facing the correct direction, but we're going to glue the wings on because that does need to be done, because that's going to be one of our points of contact. So we'll put some water down, mainly because I've just washed the brush, some PVA there, and we'll glue those in place just simply by pushing in. And that is one of the few things that's fitted relatively well on this kit. It's been horrendous. So there we are. With those stuck in, we now realise that what I was doing before, I actually had this right to the edge and the wing was hanging over the end, which would have meant that it wouldn't sit flat on any table. So that would have been a bit silly. So what I've done is I've gone away. I have any number of these of twigs and stuff. When I see something I think would look good on my tabletop, I generally do go and pick it up. And what we're going to do is, I'm not going to use any kind of any additional base. I'm going to have it quite flat. I'm just going to do the sand and paint and leave it at that. I'm not going to put any build up any other contours. But what we're going to do is we're going to stick this twig into place, and that will then also be a point of support for the wing, as you can see. So that's why the plane stopped where it did. It's hit this tree. So when this tree is in place, the wing could be glued to the tree, and that will help position that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the PVA and I'm going to glue that twig down, and then I'm going to support it, and then I'm going to leave it, and that's what I'm going to go to for the now, because that needs to be solid, and then I'll probably come back after that and start gluing other things in. So yeah, so let's get that glued down. Put the PVA, and I've kind of split a bit off just to act as hopefully as a bit more security. A lot of these have been picked up months, this one potentially even years ago, so I've had them for a very long time, and so I know that they're good for diorama usage. They're not going to go mouldy on me. So there's that, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to put this rock in place, just to hold it in place so it doesn't tip at the correct angle. There we are. So I'm going to leave that to dry. It probably won't take very long. I've got a few other bits and pieces I can get on with now immediately, and I'll come back to that a bit later on and do the next bit of gluing. But I'm already enjoying this more than the entire process of making the plane. Yay. In that time, and that was a very short amount of time, I've changed my mind. I'm going to glue the fuselage in place because it's going to act as a support for the tree. So the tree is going to wibble when I do this. You're going to have to do this very carefully. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put glue on the bottom here, glue on the ramp, glue on the wheel. Again, this isn't going to be the be-all and end-all of the support which this plane is going to have. I will be building up sand and other bits around it, and maybe I will do some terrain, some of Luke's terrain stuff, but mainly it's going to be supported. Yeah, mainly it's going to be glued with other things, but for now that's going to hold that in place much better. And so this can come in here, and finally we can put a dollop of glue between the wing and the tree, and then I'm going to leave it, and then we will be happy because it will all be secure, hopefully, when it dries. Tell you what, let's trash it all, shall I, first? Gotta love working on camera. See, these mistakes, which I make all the time, I'm sure other people do as well. I'm sure other people do it. It can't just be me being a klutz all the time, can it? There we are. That now should be secure. And even a little bit of glue there. There we are. So that should now prove to be secure. And when it's dried, it shouldn't move. There we are. I'll leave it like that, and I'll bring you back when I'm ready to do the next step. I'm going to do a quick experiment and leave this to dry overnight. So what I'm thinking of doing is putting the terrain paint and the sand mix on this to add some texture and potentially to fill in the gaps underneath the slightly raised areas of the string. So I'm going to give this a good stir. I'm actually going to need to do this a good stir, so I'll keep talking, then I'll give this a good stir, and then I'll come back and do it. So yeah, so I'm going to paint just the middle 4 or 5 squares, not all of it, to see whether it works, because then I can easily deal with it if it's not quite as good. I don't want to spend ages and ages and ages doing it. I don't actually know if this is going to adhere very well. There we are, I'm getting this stirred nicely while I'm talking, so let's just get it done. Yeah, so I'll do the middle few squares, put some of my number 1 sand on, and then I'm going to leave it overnight to go off and see how well that looks. And if it looks well, then I'll finish the rest. The other thing is, I'm still debating whether I'm going to put my numbers actually on these squares or whether I'm going to make something that will go on the sides. I'm tending towards numbers on the squares, so it's built in because I'm building this specifically to have the grid on, and so integrating the numbers with the grid makes sense, but yeah, we'll see. Let's get this painted on. You've all seen me do this before with my terrain paint. I clearly hadn't stirred this well enough the last time I used it, which was funny enough only earlier today, so I probably didn't get very much paint in that application at all, because all the paint was at the bottom, stuck to the bottom. Good bit of stirrage, still a bit lumpy. There we are. Right, so let's put some of this on. And what's actually going to happen is it's actually going to be pushed underneath where there's a gap. So my brush is trying to push underneath to fill that gap, so that the sand, when it drops on, acts as a little bit of cement. So what I might do is actually just this one square and then just the edges of the surrounding square and just see how it goes, because if it does work I can do this quite quickly tomorrow. So yeah, let's just do that. Fill in those gaps under there. But the key thing is I don't want to go over the top of the string, because the string is supposed to stay there and be visible. So I do need to be a little bit careful and accurate. There we are. A couple of drips. Doesn't matter. They will get covered with sand. Right. Let's get my sand and scatter it on over those drips as well, because why not? So I'm going to leave that like that with the sand on top overnight. I'm going to go and clean my brush now. Leave that overnight and see how that looks in the morning. So yeah, fingers crossed that works. Very happy to say that that has worked fine. I left that overnight, as I said I would. Come to it this morning, emptied it off. I've got my big tray that I can empty large terrain into, and that's fine. So what I'm going to do now is just go across with the same terrain paint, and I'm going to finish the board off. So I'll get that done. Next up, for the oak and iron ships, I'm going to be putting a very, very light grey wash over the sails. So you can see I've got some grey wash, and I'll be putting the details of that on the screen now. It is the Vallejo Game Colour Pale Grey 73202, and as you can see, this is very, very watered down. I've added a lot of water to it, and I'm just putting it on over all of the sails, just to make them not quite so glaring white, give them a little bit more texture, and you can see that I've only done the one coat of white, and I'm quite pleased with how that looks, because I don't think it should be shiny and clean. It's just going to be nice and grey and a little bit more varied in colour. So I'm going to do that for all of the sails now. Just a very, very light and very watered down pale grey wash. So that will not take me very long, and I will turn the camera off. There's no point in watching me do this over and over again, and I'll be back for the next step very, very shortly. With the light grey wash now drying on my sails, I'm now going to start on the a little bit of a wash, again another light wash of Magic, otherwise known as Aglet's Earthshade, and I'm just going to put that over all of the ships, all of the actual bodies of the ships. And this is mainly at the moment to pick out the details, so that when I come back in with a little bit more detailed colours, I can see a little bit more of the texture. So I don't want it to be too heavy. It's a little bit heavy there as it is. Let me just zoom that in slightly, actually, so you can see. There we are, that's a bit better. So I'm not going to do it too heavy. That was a little bit heavy at first, so take some of that off. And let's do this side so you can see. This one is actually the brigantine. So yeah, just to put a little bit of a shade in, and to bring out some of those details, and we'll put the back end on as well. There we are. So that's the stern. I'm going to get my nautical terms right eventually, and that's just going to, as I say, bring out the details. So I'm going to go across and I'm going to wash all of them with a light Aglet's Earthshade like that, and let that to dry. First of all, let me show you what these actual look like when they come in the box. These are fresh out of the starter set and they're punch cards. So what you get is you get an island, you get 3 of these each size. You get an island on one side, and on the other side you get the fog bank, which takes up the same space. And then smaller than that you have the rocky shoals, and on the back of that you have rocky shoals that are hidden by a fog bank, it seems like. I think there's rock in there. So that's what I'm going to be looking at recreating, is 4 items of scatter terrain. There's going to be an island, which will look like that one. There will be a large fog bank, which will look like that. There will be a small shoals, that will look like that, and there'll be a smaller fog bank which will have some small rocks in it as well. So that's what I'm going to be looking to reproduce. They're pretty cool as they do come out of the box. They certainly are good enough, and you don't have to do this, but well, I like to make things complicated for myself, and also I'm quite excited to see whether my idea for how to do this is going to work. So yeah, let's gather the materials together and see what we can do. So the materials that we need pretty much basically are in front of us. First of all, I've just got a bit of card here, and what I'm going to be using that card for is tracing around for the fog banks, and also for the rock shape. So I'll be tracing around the shape of the because I think that it's best to keep to these shapes and the sizes as they come out of the box, because then you're not making something that's custom, and I think they are designed for the game. So I'm going to be cutting the shapes out of that card, as simple as that. And that's just something that came out of a pizza. The second thing is this, which is transparent silicone. Okay, so basically bathroom sealant, and it's transparent. It's important that it's transparent, so that's the other thing. Here I've got a board which is only going to be used for building on. That's just there for me to clamp things down and work on. I'm not actually going to be cutting that up. And the last thing to show here is something I'm actually terrified of, which is cling film. I'm a bloke. Blokes do not do cling film well, so this is going to be challenging, but you need a roll of cling film. And underneath the bench, just over here, just a little bit out of shot, I have some blue foam, some very thin blue foam. I think that is 1 centimetre thick. So those are my materials. I'll obviously be using glue and other things as well, but those are the physical materials I'll be using. So what I'll do is I will get myself ready, clear away all the things I don't need, and we'll start the first step. First of all, let's get these template shapes cut out. So I will draw around each of these shapes and then cut it out with scissors, and it will be as simple as that. So there's the first one, and then this needs to be done twice, because one of them is going to be for the fog bank and one of them is going to be for the unfoggy rocks. There we are, that's the first one done. So I'll cut the 2 out, and actually, you know what, I missed that bit, didn't I, because I couldn't get in because of the angle. So let's do that. There we are. So that's that cut out now. Cut the other 2 out, and I'll be back when I'm done for the next step. With these shapes cut out, I'm now going to blue tack them to my board. This is just to hold them in place so that they don't move around while I'm doing the other things, and try to squash the blue tack as flat as you can, so that it doesn't cause a little bump. So we'll just blue tack these 3 shapes in. The smart amongst you will have noticed that I haven't done the island. There is a good reason for this. I'll be coming to that later. That's probably the more complex of the ones, because it needs to actually be built up. These ones are quite simple. And the next thing I'm going to do is a thing, like I've said, which I'm the most nervous of. We're going to spread what Americans would call saran wrap, and what I call cling film, because I'm British, and we're going to spread that over. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to fold it underneath at one end and then clamp it in place so that it's not going to move. And having lots and lots of clamps, I apologise, you can't see, I've zoomed too far in. There we are, that's better. So yeah, so I'm going to put this on and I'm going to clamp it in place so that it can be pulled tight across the entire thing. So I'll get that done. I really don't like cling film. It scares me. It confuses me more than anything how it works. Right, so we'll pull that nice and tight, and then cut it. This is like jumping out of an airplane without a parachute, trying to do cling film on camera. I won't do it in front of Angela, let alone normally, because I'm so scared of doing it wrong. Right, so we're nearly there. Let's pull that nice and tight and clamp it in place. There we are. So now we have cling film which wants to be nice and tight, and it is nice and tight. We can start thinking about the next steps. So the idea here is that each of these that we use, oh dear, drop it. The idea is that we use the silicone sealant, we spread it out over, and then it dries clear, and then we peel it off, or we cut out off the cling film, and then we can just set that down as a flexible item of terrain with some rocks in it, with some fog, which will be cotton buds, cotton wool, and that's how that'll work. I'll come to the island next and show you how I'm going to do that, but for now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the rocks, because that's going to be the easiest one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually build up some of my largest sand, so I'll just gather that together. Okay, here we are. So I've got some large sand pieces, stone pieces that I've sifted out, and I'm going to use those as the first initial of the rocks, and I'm also going to put one or two slightly larger rocks in as well. However, the first thing to do is to open my silicone and find my applicator. So I will pause the video now, go and get that, and be back very shortly. Okay, I have found my applicator. It took me a while of hunting, but here it is, and I've gathered some slightly larger rocks, as you can see as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move the rocks a bit, and you'll see why I've done the template. So I'm going to apply some of this silicone to the cling film, saying a lot because I'm a little bit nervous. Oh, I also need to clip the end of this part of the applicator as well. Forgot to do that. So strong scissors. Done. So what we'll do is we'll start applying the silicone like that over the shape. Now the silicone in this case doesn't matter as much if it goes a little bit out, because it's clear, so long as we don't get the actual obstruction in the wrong place, then we're alright. And always, always, always put the little red cap back on, or whatever colour it is for what you buy, so that your silicone doesn't go off in the tube. With that done, what we're going to do is I'm going to get my alcohol, my 199% alcohol here, and I'm just going to use my fingers on this because I think it's going to give me the best control. So we're going to dip a finger in the alcohol because that helps to move the silicone, and we're just going to press it down and smooth it down like so. There we are. And it will start to stick, which is what the alcohol's for. So make sure you refresh your alcohol before it starts to stick too much. Bit stinky. I've got the window open. You might be able to hear Rosie and Angela in the pool, a little paddling pool outside. It's summer seems to finally be here. I hope I'm not speaking too soon, but it does seem to be. So there we are. We've got ourselves a nice little patty of silicone. And what we're now going to do is we're going to press our stones into it. So the larger stones are going to press into it, like so. And then I'm going to get a little handful of smaller stones, scatter them around on it, and press them in as well within the template. And I can always put a little more silicone on if I need, which I might do. But that there, when that dries, should hold those stones in place, and that should be sufficient. I'm smiling because I can hear Rosie squealing in the pool outside. There we are. So that's our rocks done. Simple as that. Next, fog. Next up, the fog banks. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off the same way with the silicon and apply that and smooth it out with our fingers. And then what we're going to do is I've got this hollow fill fibre which comes from the inside of like actually from an old dog bed which my dog ripped up, or inside a pillow from your bed or whatever, comforter. So hollow fill, it's like cotton wool but it's slightly harder wearing, so it's slightly better for this purpose. So what we'll do is we'll start off with the small one and then I'll do the big one off camera because it'll be basically the same, and then I'll leave this to dry and we'll start on the next thing, which is going to be the island. So we dip our finger in the alcohol and then smooth out our silicon over the top of the cling film. As soon as it starts sticking, a little bit more alcohol because you don't want it to stick to your fingers. That can be a good technique or a good effect if you're looking at doing waves, but for now we're not looking at doing waves. I'm just looking at smoothing it out, so I don't want it sticking to my fingers just yet. So just make that nice and smooth. Of course it is ocean, so having some wave-like pattern in there isn't the worst thing in the world. And what we're going to do is, for this one, I'm going to just literally make it the right size. I want it, and tear it up a bit, as you can see, and then press it into the silicon. There we are, and leave that there. So there we are, we have rocks down here, and we have a fog bank there. I'm now going to do the bigger one, which will take a little bit longer, and then I'll be back in a minute with the island. Alright, let's start with this island then. So I've got a little bit of this 1 centimetre thick blue XPS, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw around the template again, just roughly, because again this edge that I'm cutting now isn't going to be the edge of the mass. As you can see, I need to come about 1 centimetre in to follow the actual extent of the template, but this is just going to give me an idea of where to cut out. So I'll cut around that now with my Stanley knife. And we're just going to trim off the excess rather than trying to be too clever at this stage. So just remove sections. Keep them though, because you may well end up using them for a little bit of terrain, a little bit of the actual contours inland. Apologies, my hand is causing the camera to seek and zoom out and all sorts of nonsense. Hopefully we're getting enough of this. So actually I'm just going to get this done and I'll be back for the next step very shortly. We have a basic template cut out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start to build up this landmass. Now if you look at this, you'll see at the bottom here we've got some rocks, and then we've got a beach going all the way around, and then we've got some kind of like hills with some trees in the middle. So it's going to be quite a simple design, I think. But what I'm first of all pointing out is that this bit here actually is not landmass. So what I probably need to do is roughly mark that out on here as the shape of the actual landmass comes across the top and then comes down here, and that then actually is done with rocks, which I will do with pebbles and gravel and what have you, as I've done my shoals. So the actual extent of the landmass and where we actually want to keep it is actually a little bit smaller. That's roughly the size of it. Yeah, that's about right. So that's where we're going to now cut out. I'm going to start to shave up from there. It's going to be quite small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my knife again, and I'm now going to cut around that. So you can see I've done that at a slight angle in places, which is not actually where I want it to be an angle. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and I'm going to bevel almost the entirety. I'm not going to bevel, so I'm not going to bevel this bit because this is cliffs coming down into rocks. I might bevel a bit here, but do a bit of a bay here. But I'm going to bevel the rest of the island around so it comes down to almost a point. Good. So we have our basic island here now. Now what the shape of the topography is a good word, and this is going to be the last thing I'm going to do for now, is because my time is running out and also I need this to glue. So what I'm going to do now is this rough shape here, I'm going to just put some small hills. So there we are. I'm going to do one that's roughly like that. So let's shape that. So that can sit there, that's one of the hills. So what we'll do now is we will do another one, which is going to be a dual peak, which is going to sit there. So we'll shape that like that. So that's going to be like that. So what I'll do is I'll shape that down now. As I said, it's going to be a kind of a dual peak. So we'll have a dip in the middle. And then finally, we're going to have a smaller peak here. So let's find another bit of scrap. That actually might be right. And let's shape that a little bit more organically. And then shave it down. And what I'll now do is I'm just going to use PVA to glue this. So I'll get some PVA, stick it down and weight it, and then that'll be me done for the bit. And I'll be back later with the next step, because it is coming up for my time to spend with Rosie, which I also absolutely love. Probably more than hobbying, I would have said. But I should say anyway. I think it's true. I love hobbying though. So, a little bit of PVA on the bottom of each of these, just a smear. Most of the security will come from the rest of the basing that I do. So that's like that. And then I'll get something heavy to sit on top and leave that for several hours at least. There we are. So, I made a start on the island. This is dried nicely, which is really good. So what I'm now going to do is glue the rock in place and the other tailplane. So the idea is that the rock will sit around there, and then the tailplane will be at quite a high angle like that, not like actually standing up, basically like that. So I'm going to put those glues in place now. I've got the PVA right here, unusually for me. And then I'll leave that to dry again overnight, so I'll just put some PVA on there. And let's just make sure we're going to get this right. So that can go like that. And that will nicely support the tailplane, which will near enough stand up on its own, as you can see, which is what we want, kind of. So there we are, that can be like that. So let's pop some glue there. And on the bottom of this, and bearing in mind obviously that we're going to be putting a load more terrain and scenic materials around, and then I will actually get a little brush to apply the small amount of glue that I want just on the wing. I don't want to put too much there, so just a little bit of glue coming in here. There we are. And now what I'll do is I'll leave that to dry again, and hopefully that will be nice and secure. And when we come to finish it off, knocked it over, that's fine. I can put it back. When we come to finish it off tomorrow, and it will be nearly finished, well, not finished off, we'll do the next steps tomorrow. That will look really good. So I'm going to put that to dry now, and I will be back tomorrow with the next step on this build. This has all got its sand on it and is now dry. So I'm now going to put another coat of the terrain paint over the top to turn it brown, because I want to have that colour underneath. However, I do want to just say that for the past, I don't know how many years, this has been my pot for my terrain paint. and I've just decided I've had enough, and I've mixed it into a bigger pot, because as good as that is, it was very small, and it was also getting very, very gunky. I mean it's filthy, it's horrible, look at that. So that'll be being binned. Long live the new pot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this with a wider brush as well. Now I've got the bigger pot, I can apply this with a wider brush. And so I'm going to come along and very gently, a nice soft brush I've got here, and I'm actually going to include going over the string, because that will just give that another security and make sure that it's all bound together. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint over the whole of this like so. So I'll turn the camera off because, well, I'm painting stuff. It's not really worth you watching, but I'll be back to show you the next step when I come to it. Here goes. Let's get this bad boy covered in brown terrain paint. Next up on these, I'm going to be picking out the steel details. So I've got the sloop here, which has very few, and I'm going to just show you where I'm going to be painting. So we have the little, let me just get that in focus. We have the little cannons, and we have a couple of, that's actually going to be not on this one, but on some of them there are some little gratings. So on the sloop we're just going to do the cannons, and then we have the cannons coming through the sides as well. So it's just going to be a very, very tiny detail on these. So I have my natural steel, which is the paint that I'm going to be using from Vallejo. There we are, that one. I'll pop the details on the screen as I normally do. So give it a good shake. Put it onto my wet palette, which is wonderful. And then let's very, very carefully detail and drop in these details. So I've got a pretty bad brush at the moment. I need to get a better brush out at some point for this, really. Just making sure that I'm staying in shot and not obscuring the camera, because quite a lot of the time I end up filming something and all you see is the back of my hand or the back of my head. So hopefully now that is going to be good. So we're just dropping in here some little bits of steel, so tiny in this scale that in one sense you're almost just giving the impression of steel rather than worrying too much about accuracy. So those are that's the innards done, and then what we're going to do is we're going to come along and just dot on around the muzzles like so, and then we'll do the other side as well. So what I'll do is I'm going to get the rest of these done, and I think that's going to be me for tonight. I've got my final cup of tea just out of shot, and I'm going to sip that and do this, and if I get this done before I run out of tea, then I'll be back for some more process, but if not, then that'll be me. So I will turn the camera off now and get on with the rest of this, and I'll be back for the next step, maybe later tonight, maybe tomorrow. I've barely dented my tea, and already I've finished the 4 ships that I currently have out. So I'm going to go on to the next step. And the next step is going to be a little bit of detailing. I'm really enjoying these, a lot. So if you look above each of the cannon ports, hopefully you'll be able to see above each of the cannon ports, there is a little cannon port cover, and then there's also these lines here that go along the hull, and also on top of the sideboard of the whatever it's called. I'm going to call it the sideboard, whatever, on top of what goes around the rim of the deck. And so I'm going to use German camouflage black brown, which is the darkest brown I have, which I think is going to be perfect for this. So yes, it is there. But obviously I'll do my usual thing of putting the details of the paint on the screen, and again using my rubbish brush, just going to show that even at 1 to 600 you don't need to have the best of tips if you've got okay brush control and well thinned paint. Let's see whether I can do this and keep this in shot again. So we're going to dip some brown on the port covers. There we are, And then what we're going to do is we're going to pick out the rest of the details on the sides in the same brown. So this is going to take some time, even on this smallest ship, because it's very, very fine work, and it's easier to put more paint on than it's going to be to take it off. I might even go and get my magnifying head mask thing for this. So I'll pop the camera off because this is going to take a long time, and I'll be back. Probably this will now take up the rest of my tea, but I'll be back with the next step shortly. Let's zoom that in. These really are great little boats, little ships. Very detailed indeed, love them. This is dry now, so what I can do is I have some fine grit sandpaper. I'm going to tear a little bit out. Oh, to turn my light down by accident, touched it. And I'm going to very gently sand down the so that it's a little bit smoother. Alright, that's all I need to do. They need to do very much. So the next step is I'm going to use wood filler on this. I'm still nervous of the Luke's APS compound mix that I've got, so let me just reach and grab my palette knife, which I didn't have to hand. So, wood filler. I'm going to put this all over it very, very carefully and very thinly. So this is going to give us, while that sanding gave me a little bit of a organic just to the contours, this is actually where I'm going to be defining those contours more specifically, as I say. So you shouldn't need very much because it's a very small shape, and we will do another sand once this is dry to smooth it off. Again, because it's such a small scale, brush marks will look quite a lot out of place. But we're going to cover the entire thing with the filler, so I'll get that done, pop some music on and you can watch. This has now all dried. As you can see, the silicone is dry. So what I'm going to do now is cut out around the shape, just using a sharp knife. And what you will probably find is that it actually will peel off. So I actually don't need to cut out. That's much easier. However, that is still a little bit underneath. That is still a little bit tacky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these off the wrap, off the cling film, like so. Turn them upside down and just leave them to dry for another little while before I do the next step. As I said before, this is a brand new technique for me. I wasn't sure how well it was going to work, and I'm pleased with how well it's working already. So there we are. So that is now, I'm going to leave that to dry. I did not need to cut around it, which is cool. I know that for future now, and so do you. So I will now leave this actually still tacked down because I can reuse this over and over again, which is pretty cool. And I'm going to let these to dry before I do the next step, which is going to be just a little bit of touching up and a little bit of paint. But I'll move this out of the way and bring them in, and so that you can see what they look like. So just give me 1 second. So like I say, it's a little bit tacky underneath still, so it does need to dry a bit, but if I turn it up, you can see that that is a fog bank, quite literally. And then, similarly, the rocks look pretty good. Now I might do a little bit more to this one, but we'll come to that later. For now, I'm going to leave these to finally go off, so I'll give them another couple of hours, I reckon. Well, I've left this overnight and it's dried, so what I'm now going to do is come in and just do some basic terrain shaping, and I'm going to do that with wood filler because it's going to dry quickly and I have a lot of it to hand. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in around this tree trunk and I'm going to reinforce it, because the last thing we need is for that to get knocked, and honestly I did just knock it a bit, but I didn't break it because it is glued in nicely. But yeah, it does need some reinforcement around it, so we'll just slap some filler in here. And the good thing with filler is it's not going to shrink, so it's not going to cause warping. However, I am aware that there is a chance of warping on this diorama, and that's why these clamps are in place. I've actually clamped it down to the base. And what I'll do is I'll do all of the terraining around them, and then I'll just put some stones or something to hide where I've not been able to put any glue or sand or whatever, and it will be fine. So that will dry in nicely. We'll now also build up around the rock, which you can't see because I've turned it to me, around the rock, and we'll do the same thing. So we'll just chuck some filler in there and slap that in so that that is also nicely secured. All of this is going to be scenic and what have you. And what I'm going to do, starting to think about the end result already on this, is I'm going to put some scrapes where it looks like, so I'm going to roughly draw a line where it looks like it might have come from, and then I will do stuff around that so that it looks like it's scraped up. So we're going to build this layer up with the filler, and then there'll be a scrape, and it'll also be kind of like built up behind that bit of fuselage. So I'm just going to get on with this. I'll leave the camera running, put some music on. It's going to take me a while. Basically I'm just going to be building up, and if I think of something to say, actually I need to change the battery on the camera, so I'll quickly pause, change the battery on the camera, and if I think of something to say, then I'll probably put it in text on the screen, or maybe do a voiceover. But I'll quickly change the camera battery, and I'll be back and finish this off. The brown paint is now dry, and that's all now nice, really solid. So what I'm now ready to do is the application of the flock. So I have my pot here of terrain paint, which is PVA, water with a little bit of dishwashing up liquid. I always get that wrong. Give it a bit of a shake. I made some fresh up the other day. And this is going to be a process. I'll film some of it, but not all of it, because it's going to take quite a long time. I'll do it very steadily and very cautiously. So I'm going to grab myself a brush. So just give me 1 second. There we are. So this is my favourite terrain brush, and I've actually managed to find someone online. These are just bought from Kaufland locally, and they don't sell them anymore typically, and I'm starting to run out of good ones, so I'm going to need to buy some more, but I've found them online now. So what I'll be doing is I'll be very carefully give it a good mix, and very carefully I'll just pick one random square. I want to leave the string. I didn't mind painting it brown because that's cool, but this really does want to leave the string, so I need to be much more careful than I was before to make sure that I don't put glue over the top of it, otherwise my flock will stick to it. So there we are. So we'll paint the each square individually with glue. Okay, once we've got one square done, around the outside here, just out of shot, here and here. I have 3 buckets of my homemade flock, and up here I've got my Builder's Sand number 2. So what I'll do is I'm going to put a little bit of the Builder's Sand number 2 on, because that will just add a little bit of variation to the flock, just like that. And then I'm not going to do what I did on the previous one, which was just try to go with one colour and do it very, very bland, which actually I ended up not liking very much. There's a reason why I don't do that. I'm going to do this much more like my normal way of putting down flock, so 3 colours, but I am going to do it quite light because I want it to show up nicely on the camera. So I'm not using my darkest flock. And probably when I do this not for camera, I'll paint 3 or 4 squares at once with the glue, so that any overspill just gets picked up and it's fine. I have to try and stay between the lines like I am now. I'm finding that quite difficult to do. And that's that. So I'm going to do that for every single square, which might take me some time, but I will show you what it looks like when it is done. That took me about an hour or so. Not so bad actually, maybe just a bit over. So now I'm going to let that to dry, and then we're pretty much ready for the game on Saturday, which I'm really looking forward to. I've got a little bit more to do for the counters, and I've got to yet make my numbers and letters for the coordinates. But yeah, really pleased. This is a much better board than the first one. So I'm going to go and let that to dry now, and looking forward to the game. It's Friday morning, and I need to seal this. It's all dry now, but I just need to put one more coat of my terrain glue. I've mixed up a big batch, so I can do this with a larger brush. So I'm just going to take a bigger brush and paint this all over, and hopefully this will all now be nice and dry for tomorrow's game. So I'm going to get that done. I'm out on the landing, so I don't have space at the moment for this inside room 13. These are now dried, and I'm actually a little bit late getting to these. I should have really done these a couple of days ago, because now I'm a bit worried that they're not going to be completely good for the game tomorrow. What I'm going to be doing now is using some more of the fast drying basing glue, and I'm going to use purple. So I've got some purple flock here. I just did a Google, and apparently purple is high contrast against yellow. Excuse me, frog in my throat. Let's get some of that tea in me, won't I? So, new plate over here. I went and bought it because I'm last of the big spenders. We'll put a bit of the basing glue on there, just a very little bit. And once again, we're going to make use of a toothpick to spread our glue around and get this purple on it. So let's just put a little bit more light on the scene for you. So let's do number 1 first. Number 1. So we'll get a little bit of glue. We'll paint it around quite thin around the edge. There we are. And then take a pinch of our purple and stick it on. A much better, a much simpler idea would have been to have used paint, not flock. But I think I've established I don't really like to do things the easy way. And that does look really quite nice. Sorry, it's a bit dark in here today. The sun is deciding to not show itself. So let me see if I can move this, get this light on the scene. There we are. It does look nice, I think. It's a bit dark, it's a bit rubbish. There we are, there's the one. Apologies for that terrible camera work. So what I'm going to do now is get the rest of them done. So I'll paint on the glue, sprinkle on the purple, move on. And I'll be back later to show you what they look like, or maybe the next clip will be me actually playing the game. Right, so we're coming back in here because we stopped recording because it didn't really work very well. However, now we're rocking and rolling. So let's go. So Pedro has just charged Candyman and has just not managed to hit him with his. Well, hit him with his knife, didn't he? But didn't wound. So now Bial, who is my number 4, is going to charge. Need to worry about your number 3. Yeah, so your number 3 is also. So he's actually going to charge number 3, throwing his knife as well. I may as well. I'm not going to gang up. Okay. So he is going to go to an inch away from number 3 and throw his knife. Gets a 2, so that does not hit. And what he is going to be around. He's going to be directly above 3. So he's on like this. He's sitting on the joining bit between 6 and 7, and C and D. He's sitting on that kind of cross.
C and D, 6 and 7.
So he's directly above 3, who's across the line, if you see what I mean.
Is there a template that best represent?
Okay, so I'm not sure. It might be. So if you take template F,
yeah,
and template A, that's about how far he is across into 6, towards 6 and 7. Actually, if you just take template F, I'll move him back. There we are.
Template
so if you take template F,
yeah,
perfect. Yeah,
yeah,
done.
okay.
Yeah, cool. So that's that. So no wound there. And then these dudes are just going to come hell for leather down. So Frank, who is my number 6, is going to be running 6 inches. So he is going to end up touching the line between 3 and 4. And he is going to end up template C, I believe. No, maybe template B.
3 and 4,
template B.
Is that D? Is that D? 3?
So he's in 3D.
Yeah.
And he is template B up and touching the line between 3 and 4. So template B away from the line between C and D and touching the line between 3 and 4. There you are, another epic, another hour and a half one. I started off with well over 2 hours of clips, so I've cut out about 45 minutes. So that tells you just how much boredom you did avoid. It's been a really good week though, and I really did enjoy that game today. We're hoping to get another game in again in a fortnight. It won't be next week now, so yeah, and hopefully we will be knocking the edges off and may even be able to film an entire back rep if that sounds of interest. Please do let me know in the comments below if you managed to make it this far and if you would be interested in seeing that and also playing me. I mean, if you do want to, pop a comment below. We can. You don't need to go to the extent that I have with regard to making scenery and what have you. You can just have a piece of paper with the squares drawn on it and move things around on that, and it will absolutely fine. Maybe I should show that off in the video as well. So I will wrap that up now. It's long enough. Don't need me rambling. I will thank you very much for watching this far, if you get this far, and I'm just going to sign off quickly tonight because it's very late and I'm quite tired. So here's my cup of tea. Thank you so much for watching this BeardClipper video. Please stay safe, stay healthy and stay well, and drink buckets of tea. Cheers.